All right, we can go ahead and start. People can trickle in. So welcome to Vegas. Hope everyone's sober. I'll try to keep this exciting. I know it was right after lunch, so we'll sprinkle in a whole bunch of demos to keep the pace up here. But this session is Microsoft Codename Dallas. It's an introduction to what you hopefully... Actually, how many of you guys saw the keynote today? Ah, great. So we'll try to basically add on and leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this to basically go into some of the deep dive questions that you might have, some of the things that we just kind of glanced over in the keynote. And as well as basically wanted to make sure that we divide this up into really 3 sections here. So first part, we want to make sure that you as a developer, as a consumer of the information, whether you're building a mobile app, whether you're building on Windows, Mac, etc., understand what it takes to actually use content from Dallas. Second part of this is going to be, what if you have content? You might actually be sitting on pretty interesting content that you want to make available globally, whether it's public domain data, whether it's commercial data, web services, structured data, blobs, etc., and what Microsoft can do for you through Dallas. And the third part is, we promised to actually talk about the business model, talk about what it actually looks like to onboard content with us and what the value props are. So with that, let's actually jump right into it. What is Dallas? Again, many of you were at the keynote, and you heard us talk about the fact that, it's a way for you to make money. But it's actually a little bit more as well. There's no Microsoft senior execs in the room, so I'll just go ahead and call it. It's really, think of it as an iTunes for data, right? To make a real analogy. Where do you go for trusted commercial information, whether it is a real-time service that you want to discover? How do you explore with that content? How do you actually acquire it and build an application or a report on top of it? So the first piece is really the marketplace. The second is the brokerage business that we're building on top of it. And this is really all the infrastructure that Microsoft's building on top of the Windows Azure platform, on top of our billing engine, to give you basically a way to own your business for any type of data, for whatever it is that you want to basically distribute. You've heard us talk about data. You've heard us talk about web services, but even analytics. So imagine you have a killer visualization that you've built or a killer report that basically makes use of private data, commercial data, and business intelligence. I mean, points of interest is a great example. A bunch of lat-long points are mostly worthless for, small, I shouldn't say worthless, they're pretty good for like small apps. But if you actually have domain-level knowledge to do turn-by-turn navigation, that's an interesting report, right? That's a map. That's something you can sell. And so with Dallas, you actually get an infrastructure for that as well. And the third piece of this is really it's the analytics and reporting as well. So it's the capability of, through Dallas, all of the information that basically meets our content bar, our services bar, is going to find its way inside Microsoft Office, SharePoint, Excel, Dynamics, right? All of our IW assets, as well as through connectors in the ISV ecosystem into other information worker assets as well. So if you walk away with nothing else from the session, really it's think of this as basically enabling you to have a new place to actually go and discover data, right? And giving you the infrastructure to actually be able to broker that content out. And so why should you as a developer care? You might be licensing content today. And really the key thing is, let's take a really simple scenario. If you were to build a Windows Phone or, take an iPhone app for dinner and a movie, to be able to get at the things that you actually need to power that application, you're looking at where do you even go to find the points of interest data? Who is the worldwide leading provider of this content? What about the theater reviews, right? The movie databases. Maybe you want to mash up crime and statistics and that sort of information. And so what you'll find is if you know where to go, are you going to deal with different payloads, different queries, different security models, different terms of use? A lot of this content is multi-million-dollar content that's basically subscribed as, no matter what you're doing, here's a $50 million DVD. That really doesn't scale to the long tail, the information worker, the developers that basically want to try a data set and basically pay as they grow. And leverage all the things that basically through the cloud of being able to do their own auditing, their own reporting, their own logging. And so, as well as things that we'll get into for mashups and consumption, how do you get semantic information through this content, right? So let's say you've got, to keep it simple, let's say 2 databases. One has got XY, one has got lat long. How do you actually know semantically that that actually can be logically joined? So Dallas is actually going to, we'll talk about this in terms of the challenges and really talk about what we're actually doing about this. So the key thing is, by way of innovating on not just the data model and the services, we're actually innovating on the business model as well to basically make sure, any content that you find through Dallas has this notion of there's a free trial, there's a transaction, there's a subscription, allowing you to basically scale your app, whether it's a crazy idea you had on Saturday night, if only you had the data, to great, you've built it, you want this to be part of the SharePoint Enterprise install. How do you actually build for that infrastructure for customers? How do you make sure that the IT can basically manage this, the works? And really, you heard us talk a lot about this in the keynote today, is how do you get a consistent REST-based API across these data sets so you can consume it on any platform, be it iPhone, mobile, et cetera. And again, reducing the friction of basically going from disparate content. How do you visually build up these queries? And we'll get into all of this through, be it proxy generation, Visual Studio support, and of course, from an information worker perspective, how do you easily discover this content and bring it down as part of your workflow, right? So imagine having a ribbon for data that you want to bring in. You've got your private data, your sales content. Wouldn't it be fantastic to just basically mash that up with, say, sales or demographics content for that as well? And so Dallas makes all of this possible. And so promise some demos to basically keep everybody awake through this. And let's just jump into a real quick one here. So how many of you use Facebook? Practically everybody. I'm sure some of you loan money out to friends as well. So what we did was we actually built a mashup of the data.gov crime data and simply joined that with locations so I can figure out, here's a nice little tool for figuring out which one of my friends are most likely to get shot and not be able to pay me back. So it's a fun little mashup. You can go to apps.facebook.com/crimestats. But this is just one of the quick, simple little things that you can do once we actually unleash this network effect of data. And of course, this is free public domain data through Dallas exposed in the same type of APIs that you can mash up with commercial data. So let's actually look at what it takes to build this, though, by giving you guys a pretty quick tour of the Dallas marketplace. So we unveiled CTP2 today. You can actually go play around with the services, consume a lot of the free trials right now. But just to give you an overview, you'll see a lot of content from public domain, from commercial data sets, in basically a large variety of areas, whether it's residential real estate, commercial real estate, demographics, theater show times. And all it takes is basically discovering what content you want and subscribing to it. So when you actually go into your subscriptions, as in the data.gov example that we're going to show, just simply go into it. And again, we've actually figured out, working with the content providers, what the main value of this data is. So you actually have 2 different ways of exposing content through Dallas. One is complete, flexible, free-form queries through OData to build up your own interesting queries. The other is a simple, sorry, we seem to have some rendering problems on this one. Just really simple optimizations for basically how you get at this. I think we can work through this. So if we do a quick preview, here is data that's actually living in our cloud. So this is basically data stored in SQL Azure that we're actually hosting for the feds. And this is, you'll notice it in table view. You can actually look at it in Atom. And of course, everything here is described as EDM, so you can do pretty interesting mashups on it. And everything in terms of paging, the raw feed formulation into Atom is taken care of automatically by Dallas. And so to get a little bit more meat inside this, let's actually show you, if you wanted to build up that data for what does crime look like, I'll just use Washington. You can simply click on anything right next to the columns and see what the sample values are for that given data set. Let's actually come out of this, out of full screen, make it so people can see. Is that a little better? Perfect. Great. And so as you're building up your queries, the service actually knows what's possible. The types of metadata that we're emitting actually allow you to have a user experience, which, again, you can use from our portal or build this inside your applications in one of the demos that we're going to be showing later today. And Really, all it takes is, from an interaction perspective, everything on Dallas is a REST-based secure API. So you pass in your account key, and that is basically used as the provisioning to figure out who the user is, who the ISV is that's actually consuming this data. And of course, that's used for things like EULA tracking, billing, reporting, auditing, logging, as well as this unique user ID that we're going to show, which basically allows you as a developer to really easy and seamlessly handle the simple one customer, one iPhone app to you just deployed a massive enterprise license and you want to know what portion of that data is used by the company's HR department, by billing, et cetera. And as a content provider, we can actually use this data back and give pretty interesting analytics back to the people that actually own the data to know how is your data being consumed by who, right? So you can figure out, are your offers working? Are mashups actually working on top of the content? Be able to tweak those things. And one other interesting thing I just want to call out here before we move on is, again, you can copy and paste these URLs inside. If you're building on Objective-C, copy and paste this. It actually include might be a little small to see. We'll just go ahead and zoom in. Your account key and your unique user ID right inside the actual header of the HTTP request, and simply the query that you can copy to a clipboard, and that's all it takes to actually execute this query. But if you are on Windows, one of the things that we make it really easy for is actually we emit dynamically on any web service a proxy layer. So you get a full, rich object model, and that really makes invoking a service as easy as a couple lines of code. So we've actually got one built here where it is a simple little Windows Forms app, and the only thing I've done was actually drag and drop a data grid view on top of this. So I'll show the code. And by adding that service proxy class to this, really all it takes to actually consume that data that we showed in the Facebook is provide your unique user ID, hopefully not in open text like this, you'd encrypt it obviously, and literally invoke that. I'll show the IntelliSense that comes up. You actually get this object model through our proxies to make it really pretty easily understood how you consume this data. And there it is. 2 lines of code for any of the Dallas data services, be it commercial news, images, NASA imagery, et cetera. Now again, one of the things that we will basically go into deep if you want to stop by at the booth is how would you actually consume this data through OData, not just from a payload perspective, but from a query perspective. What kinds of interesting things could you do? Maybe you don't want to query on just the state. Maybe you actually want to query on, well, actually, we do support city, bad example, but there might be other fields that you might want to be interested in actually querying and aggregating and doing counts on. That's where the Open Data Head comes in. We'll actually show that. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump right into the rest of the presentation here, because we've got a lot to cover. So I don't know if everybody knows, but really Dallas is built, and I think this is one of the cool things, is we are built completely on top of the Windows Azure platform. We're part of, but also the biggest dog fooder of the platform itself, where our compute runs in Windows Azure Compute. Our ACS security is one of the things that we use to basically imagine you're a Boeing and you want to manage federated identity for your users and you don't want to use live ID. We have support through that through ACS. Our storage is in SQL Azure as well. But if we get into what the actual architecture of the system is, you can now suddenly see that data can live pretty much anywhere. We're an abstraction over where the data is. It could be in your private data center. It could be in Windows Azure Tables. It could be in Amazon, Google, et cetera. We don't really care because it's an information broker service for that content. And we'll get into what it means to actually have this information as part of our marketplace and what are the service level contracts and as well as the SLA to be able to get this content out. And obviously, everything else from a content provider and from an ISV perspective that you don't have to take care of is on the bottom there, whether it is the billing engine that can scale globally, the catalog. And again, we're showing an early prototype of what the catalog is on SQL Azure services. That will change for RTM. Expect more of a iTunes-ish type of experience for showcase data sets, showcase services, opportunities for ISVs to plug in their applications right there inside our marketplace. And again, everything in terms of auditing, management, having that capability basically within your infrastructure, hosted by Dallas. So Promise more demos to keep everybody awake after lunch. This one's an actual interesting mashup where we're going to talk into what it takes to build augmentation. I mean, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with augmented reality types of scenarios on mobile, but imagine being able to augment something like a map, be it Google Maps or Bing here in this case, for actual visual analysis and scenarios. So what we're looking at here is a real example of if I wanted to build a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, what are the businesses that I'd be competing with? So let's go ahead and bring in that commercial content by basically adding in a layer from, we've brought this in from Info Group, of points of interest in the area. And the second thing you want to do, whoops, I don't want to add a new layer here. What I want to do is actually bring in a second layer to show this mashup of commercial and public domain content to instantly bring in these census boundaries. And here, apparently I'm looking at arson. You can change this to basically look at all these scary things that you probably didn't want to know about the city you're living in, but the things that you might want to avoid when you're doing site planning, for instance. And all of this, again, was made through actually, we'll bring in one layer to show what it takes to do this. So if we bring in Seattle crime again, through, whoops, 2007, the automatic, this is simply an app, actually, we should preface, that we've built that's basically inside of the Bing Maps First Light experience. So this is Silverlight layers augmenting the map, allowing visual interaction on top of it. But this is an app that anybody here can actually build. And the key thing is, through the information that we're actually emitting out through the cloud, you're able to do things like what value do you actually want to emit from that metadata as part of your joins. So here we'll say something like stolen property. And again, you'll notice when I actually pick the King County Census, automatically track that, hey, I could have joined this on city, on state, on some spatial element, right? So the software actually emits enough metadata that you can get a semantic analysis of, that's lat, that's long. I can go ahead and join this. I can do something interesting with this. So it's a pretty basic example of showing, again, I'm just going to augment the second map on top of this. But how you basically do that visual analysis, bring in the multiple points on top of that to actually do pretty crude, that was basically a mashup that we built in a couple of days to show how you can augment news, feeds, images, on top of that, bringing in your private data as well as public data. So basically getting this nice abstraction over where the content lives as you deliver value to your customers. But that was a simple scenario, and at this time, I'd actually like to invite Chris Stolte from Tableau Software to show a much better experience of what an ISV can do with this data. So,
great.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Mo. So Tableau Software is an ISV. We sell visual analytics software for either internal corporate BI or for building visual interfaces to data on the web. And one of the biggest challenges our customers always have is getting data that they can bring into our application. So integration with Dallas is a great opportunity for us. We want to make it really easy for those customers to just go to one place, procure the data, and then be able to make it available in our application. So I'm going to show you that interaction, assuming this wakes up just fine here. Here we go. So I'm going to do this and show our integration, which we did recently, kind of in a story situation here where imagine I'm a blogger, and I've actually, as a student, studied abroad, and I want to do a blog where I talk about the trends in studying abroad. Where are people studying? Where are they coming from? And so I want to put this up on the web. And the first question that our customers always have, either internally or externally, is, so how do I get that data? Where am I going to get that from? And how am I going to get that into my application? So in this case, what I would love to do is take my blog post and put a really great interactive graphic showing this data right there. So the first thing I have to do is just go over to Dallas, and I can browse the catalog and look for data sets that are going to help me out. And as Mo showed earlier, there's a really wealth of information here. In this case, I came in earlier and I subscribed to the data. So UNESCO, through UN Data here, has a really great data set on students studying abroad. So I can just click here and go to explore this data set. And I'm going to go and I'm going to focus on one of the metrics here, which is students from a given country studying abroad. And I'm just going to click Analyze and then jump into Tableau here. So what we have over here is the same students from a given country studying abroad. We read this down from Dallas using the Atom feed. And it's now in here, and we can start matching this up. And so we have country, we have the number of students, we have a time period, and I can just start taking this data, and I can throw it on a map. I can hide this map options card here. I can take those students studying abroad, make that stand out a little bit here, and quickly create a picture of that data. So 5 minutes ago or 2 minutes ago, I didn't have the data at all. Now we've just gone and grabbed it from this trusted repository where we can get all the data in the same format, and I have a somewhat interactive graphic. Now this actually has time period. This is the change in time and things, so I can take time period here. And actually I'm going to put it on the pages shelf in Tableau. And what this is going to let me do is look at the time trend of this same data. So now I'm animating through that feed we got and seeing it's an interesting trend of China emerging as the primary country where people are studying abroad. So I want to turn this into a complete interactive application, and now I want to put this back on the web. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this view, which gives me kind of that big picture. I'm going to put out a quick filter here, which lets consumers of the view filter, and I'm going to switch it over to a little slider. So now people have a way to sort of flip through the different regions of the world. I'll leave that on Africa there. And I'm going to create another sheet to go with that, and then I'm going to put this up in my blog. So I'll take this here, duplicate that sheet, and in this case I'm going to take time period and that filter off. And in this case I want to really show the time trend. I want to show the emergence of some countries and other countries not emerging. So I'm going to go and change my perspective, and I'm just going to click on the Show Me button here, which will let me look at, sorry, one step back here. Will let me look at this same data from different perspectives, and I'm just going to switch to a bar chart. I'm going to sort that data, flip it around, bring in regions so I can easily see which regions are dominating. We can see Asia up here at the top. And actually, I still want to get that time trend, so I'm going to keep modifying this view, a couple more steps here. I'm going to put region over here, bring time period out, bring out country, and rotate that. And now I've got a view which is showing every single country's change in students studying abroad, plus my map. And I'll add a couple of typical web features you would see, such as I'll give this a nice tooltip. Maybe or I'll give it, so I'll give it country and then number of students. Let's insert that here. And why don't we make the country nice and bold, and maybe 16 point, we'll make this 12. And now we pretty much have a nice little interactive graphic with tooltips, and I'm going to combine this into a single dashboard and publish this up. So my blog happens to be about 750 wide, so I'm going to put it there.
So you can actually control how this is rendered on a web page.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'll just take those two views. We had that earlier map view. I'm going to bring that out here. Oh, wait, that's the view. I'll create the map up here. Combine these together, and now I have two views. And I'm going to do a little trick here where I turn on highlighting. So when I click a country up here, it's going to show that country's trend down there. So now, in I think the 5 minutes we had here, Mo, create an interactive graphic of that data from Dallas, and I can go and I can publish this up to the web and put that in that blog. And so as somebody who would have before had real trouble even getting the data at all, I've been able to mash it up, create an interactive experience on the web. If this was internal corporate BI, I might have integrated this with my own sales data or demographics, or I might start public conversations by putting this data out on the web, or simply create this interface and share that. So the view's coming up here. And now what happened is our Windows application has turned this into pure AJAX DHTML. So what we're seeing rendered in here is all these views. And I can just go down to the bottom of this view, grab that embed code, and now switch over to that blog. I have it open here. Drop in that iframe and publish it, and we should be able to view the post. And now where I had something saying, I really wish I could put an interactive graphic there, we now have that same data sourced from Dallas online with the full interactivity showing that trend, and I can actually talk to people very quickly about this. So I went from an Atom feed to that interactive graphic. And the other side of this is, every time one of our corporate customers says, oh, how would other data come to bear and help me understand this, they can just connect to data, and they can see all their Dallas subscriptions directly there in the application. So we can do that deep level of integration where now they don't have to scour the web. They can just come to one place and find the data they need and bring it together.
That's fantastic, Chris. And I got to ask, I mean, we just showed going from you didn't know where to go get the data to actually creating a blog post in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
How long did it take to actually build the integration of actually connecting to Dallas, building it as part of your app?
So this is one of the really exciting parts is, I think we were talking to developers, and it took them about 2 days to do the complete integration, and 90% of that was our UI code and figuring out where we want to put that internally. Just being able to get all the metadata, to get the data. It was a couple hours between us saying, hey, we want to connect to Dallas, this is going to be a great story, and having that up and running. So it was a really great experience.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Well, great. I think with that, we'll jump into the second part of the presentation, which is basically all about, we've shown consumption at this point, and we'll show a little bit more as we transition into the OData and the publication model. But really here we want to get into what it looks like. What were some of the glimpses that you saw in today's keynote of actually getting content from your private data center, your cloud, our cloud, into Dallas and making money on top of that? And so before we do, I think it helps to think about what is the actual value to a content provider, whether you're a billion-dollar content provider today selling content, or you're a small ISV who just built an interesting web service, or you've got great curated, authoritative data, whether it's an NGO or whether it's commercial content. Really, looking at Microsoft and Dallas as the information marketplace, it's going to be about reach, right? You're going to be able to leverage our developer channel, our information worker channel, as well as our assets. So you think of, 600 million IW users, the connection of Dallas through things like Power Pivot, through Dynamics integration, SQL Server integration, all the things that we're basically talking about and showing actually at our booth. Being able to leverage that as the instant discovery point for your content. So whether it's for a data cleansing scenario, or whether it's for reporting, for a BI, or simply some other visualization tool such as the one that Chris showed, being able to get your content out there globally with Microsoft vested in actually selling this content as part of our, you bought SQL Server, would you like data with that? You bought Office, would you like data with that? It's just a massive new or basically an augmentation to your existing channels in terms of content. And it's also really about what do you get for free? Well, not only do you get basically to own your business model, you get to set your terms, you get to set your pricing, but you get to do it in such a way that it's consistent to where if one developer or one IW is interested in finding content from, say, data.gov, they automatically know the API, they have the billing infrastructure to be able to consume your content or your services with a single click. So it's a really great ecosystem of data and applications and analytics that we're building as part of this. And so with that, actually what I want to show is a quick demo of what, these are early bits. So this is where we actually want, this is CTP2, we want feedback on this, but we'll actually show what it takes to actually bring data in. And so with that, let's just go into, there we go. I see others are adding content as well. So we'll actually just go into the data set here. And I've already logged in with my live ID as a content provider where, Dallas has basically provisioned me to bring in information into this marketplace. And so you can notice that, this, in our view, we can actually create instances as part of our capacity plan for your content. So you can basically get a SQL Azure database, you can get Windows Azure tables with Blob Store, or you can basically try to connect to your private data center if you can match our interface. And say you're exposing an OData feed, it becomes very, very easy for us to basically give you a really rich experience. Everything you saw in the information marketplace of being able to get automatic proxy class generation, visual, friendly discovery, as well as the syndication of our marketplace inside the IW tools. But here what I'll actually do is say I want to connect to a SQL Azure database, and I'll just bring up I did not memorize this string. And I'll actually give it a connection string. And I'll go in deep on this one because you can imagine for things like load balancing, if we throw the traffic of Bing Maps, for instance, or Bing, or the Facebook app is a great example, and you're suddenly going from a couple queries a day to a couple 100 million queries, how do you scale? Well, that's one of the biggest value propositions of using the Windows Azure platform for actually, again, we hit on this in the keynote of the reliability. But if your data is in our cloud, we can do things like automatic partition scale out. We know how many people are reading it, making copies, and making that available. But we've actually given you a capability to where if we're connecting to your SQL Server database in your data center, give us the connection strings that are required to basically hit our SLA for query and for throughput. Or bring in an XML, bring in CSV. I mean, basically, if you have data, we can take it. So here, I forgot one thing. We just need to give it a name. So we'll call this Mo's data. And immediately what will happen is, you actually get to load the schema for the database. So we've inferred it. And here's something interesting is going to happen where we've actually pulled in, whether this is a view or whether it's a set of tables, you can come in here and basically automatically just kind of map what things you want as part of the data set that you upload. And again, this is going to be critical in a bit. We'll go into it. But one thing I do want to show here is something we didn't talk about in the keynote, which is these semantic hints. This ever-growing ontology of things that are going to make associations among data sets really, really easy for developers and information workers, where no matter what you've called your columns, we're going to go through the canonical set. We're not going after schema normalization and solving world hunger. We're basically looking at what are the actual logical join points amongst data. So things like time, name, identifiers, and location. I mean, everybody understands what a city is, what a zip code is. Where it starts getting harder, things like telephone numbers and formats. But this is where we have a lot of IP to be able to infer, given a bunch of data, whether it be from a web service payload or from a column in a database, what could that be? Is there a 90% chance that this is a telephone number? Is there a 90% chance that this is actually location based on constraints, based on bounds, et cetera? And so you actually get to control that as a content provider by either picking from the set that we have or actually recommending a new one. Like if you're doing demographics, you might say, hey, you're missing SIC code. Here's another one. We basically vet it out with our content ecosystem and add that to this. But so let's go back. Actually, here what we want to do is we enable all the columns for this data set. And the second thing, all you have to do is be able to add an offering. So again, whether your data is free or whether it is commercial, Mo's DVDs, we'll just give it a name. And basically pick your logo. This is everything that's required to basically fund the or fuel the marketplace experience. So we're actually going to show Greg Landon's content here. Whoops! Wow! Don't look. Too many windows open. There we go. And we'll just give it a quick little description where this is everything that basically can be broken out between your marketing group, your business development group, and the engineering group for the various processes here to actually let them work on this in parallel. So this is, and again, this is the namespace that will actually give this content. And so the next step is once your marketing group has figured out how to actually describe this content so that developers and IWs can find it, you can add things like categories. What are the things that, where should this show up? When there's a ribbon inside Office, for example, when this stuff shows up in Bing. Add links to your documentations, to your samples, because again, we basically are trying to get you to own your business and own your marketing for this. And finally, this is a critical piece. How much of the data do you actually want to expose? Imagine you've got a rich data set for tons and tons of content, basically. You upload it once, or you give us access to it once, and create N offers based on that. You might create a free offer that says, hey, they can search by UPC in the sense that, these are DVD barcodes. Search by UPC and give them the name. That's it. That's the free offer. Then we'll introduce a light one that basically says search by name, by UPC, and you get a subset of the information back, and so on and so on. So you actually get to specify what is queried and what is actually returned as part of the payload. And this also happens for web services as well. So things like the NAVTech real-time gas prices for theater showtimes, for the Associated Press news that actually aren't in our cloud, we're building up the infrastructure for that as well. And so here we'll just basically, again, for simplicity, say everything's fine. We'll actually enable everything. And again, another key thing of basically reducing the friction for this is if you're a billion-dollar provider, you probably have a EULA, you probably understand exactly what your carve-outs are for your data. But if you're a developer and you basically say, I don't have an attorney, I just basically built an interesting piece of content that I want other people to leverage inside their iPhone apps, inside their IW things, we'll actually give you a terms of use that you can use that can actually do things of augmentation, reporting, offline scenarios, per transaction systems. So again, pick our EULA, pick yours, and you're pretty much good to go. And finally, on pricing, actually define what the pricing is for this. And again, to be able to hit on two things, the pay-as-you-grow weekend coder who just discovered your data, enabling pay-as-you-grow type of things on a transaction basis, we can handle through a bundle, as well as your per user per month pricing on top of your content. Again, you set it, you publish it, Microsoft handles the rest. But here we'll basically say it's $100, and basically let's add a transaction bundle as well, to where, again, you even get to own what your transaction bundle is. And this is important. Let's say you are a photo provider, you're National Geographic. And so an article or a video or an image might actually be an actual transaction. So your bundle transaction would be one, and you would give that a price. Or you might have an API and you say, hey, every time somebody calls this get tax identifier ID, I'll allow 100,000 calls at, let's say $5 or something. And you'll notice the X%. Really, what this is about is, we're building this as a platform enabler for Microsoft. I mean, obviously, the things that, you notice that you're not having to pay as part of the information worker if you're using a service today are things like compute and bandwidth, because Dallas is actually doing that. And of course, once billing comes on in the future CTP, we're actually handling the credit card surcharges as the merchant of record for this. So don't think of this as basically kind of like a greedy app store type of thing. Really think of this as, by using our platform, we're hoping you're using our developer tools, you're using open data, you're using Microsoft Stack. Of course, you can do it on anything, but it's basically covering the cost of what it is for that content and for that infrastructure to be able to deliver this globally. Multiple data centers around the world, global billing, et cetera. And so, all that said, why don't we actually go ahead and publish this out? So, the one sheet here is obviously in this build, we have, my token gives me instant approval. But obviously, there will be a validation step here where we actually, within 14 days, we get back with you on, because we want to make sure you actually own this content, right? Do you have the legal right to redistribute this content? Have you set up the right types of things for if any of you have used the marketplace like Apple or Amazon, you know the kind of type of data that you basically have to give out for payouts, for validation, et cetera. And we've built a pretty optimized system to be able to handle that. So now that this content is actually live here, what we can do is, again, this is another private build. We'll just refresh this and go to test company, where there's my DVD collection. And again, what I can do is, with that new pricing, go ahead and subscribe to that EULA that the content provider actually specified, and suddenly start looking at now through an open data protocol. Actually, sorry, the window is doing its thing with the resolution, but again, you'll notice basically same type of thing. You can look at it in table format. We'll add map view. We'll add image view. You can look at the raw atom for this. But now, instead of actually getting an instant service class proxy for this, what you can do is just copy and paste this and bring it into Visual Studio to do a service reference. So now you've got the full power of OData through things that are actually published through this marketplace experience. And what we'll do here is quickly jump into VS, go into another project here, set a startup. And this one's actually a funny query. It's using the UPC service, but we're just going to do it in a quick command line so you can see it. What we've done is we've added a service reference to the actual service that we published for the UPC data. And the query is trying to find basically, and I apologize if I offend anyone here if these are your favorite data sets, but we're basically going through and saying what movies were so bad that they were actually recalled, like from the shelves. And so you can see, there's the Teenage Strangler, the Giant Spider Invasion, a lot of great things by that studio were actually recalled. But again, and if you look at the query, this is actual link right through Dallas through the power of open data platform being bound. So it just really trying to take out the friction of how data is consumed, how data is discovered, how you actually do your queries, and now through the CTP, how you can actually expose data to the global marketplace through this as well, and be able to leverage things of not just free, simple queries that are basically optimized for a specific thing, but again, getting the full power of OData through this publication experience. So if we jump right back into the deck. Yes, and finally, we wanted to show I wanted to shock you guys with my beautiful user experience here on the iPhone. But again, just hitting on the fact that we talked about this in the keynote as well, of, again, through the power of open data, the open data protocol, you can basically consume this data on any platform. So here we've built a simple little thing in Objective-C to where, it really, the main code is right here, right? I mean, the rest of it is all Objective-C code parsing where you're setting up a connection, adding the header values for the thing that actually goes over the REST wire that gets authenticated for your calls. And the query actually is the REST query, the string with format that's passed in. The rest of it is just XML parsing. And of course, now you can actually go to the open data platform, opendataprotocol.org, and actually download the iPhone SDK as well to make it that much easier for actually consuming this content. So what are the requirements for actually bringing data into Dallas? This has got to be the number one thing that we've been absolutely hammered with on the interest from the developer community who have built interesting web services in their cloud or ours, and people that basically have content. And really, think of this as, we jokingly call this the iTunes for data, but it's not an app store, if you will. We want to make sure that if you as a developer are building on top of this, the data is not going to go away right as soon as you ship your app and try to sell it, right? That this is trusted quality content. There's someone always vouching for the quality of this data. So, if it's theater showtimes, if it's points of interest, we're using Navtech, right? If it's demographics, Pitney Bowes. I mean, these are, we basically went after who are the brands in any given domain, but at the same time, this does not really mean size. It's all about quality. It's all about, the curation. Who can basically vouch for the fact that, this data is actually quality and useful for the ecosystem. So the basics, you have to have rights for this. You have to be able to actually distribute it through a marketplace and resell it. You have to make the content available for at least 12 months. Because again, as a content provider, you're going to have the power of Microsoft sales actually selling this as part of their enterprise agreements. That's one of the big things that we're working on. So, would you like Microsoft to basically sell your service or your data? It's a pretty big opportunity. You have to be able to handle a query load, and this is why we give you the ability to use our infrastructure, use our cloud, and be able to sign up for things like auto scale up, auto scale out for throughput and such, but also just basically match our interface if you're using a separate data center. As well as, this is actually, it's a contract for actually balancing these things. Sign up for your load balancing, be able to handle latency in the payload formats, and of course, no breaking changes. We really are trying to build a trusted ecosystem of content and services. So there are certain things that we're asking all content providers. And if you're commercial, what we're saying the bar is pretty high right now as we basically build up the ecosystem. You have to be in the top 5 by revenue or sales for your industry. And so the reason for this is we just want to make sure that the quality, trusted content is part of the marketplace for this. And again, we'd love community feedback on this because it's the first time we're talking about it in terms of what the actual model and bar is for content and services. So stop by the booth, stop by afterwards, and we can certainly talk about this. Because we know there are certain markets, certain verticals where this might not apply, as well as for public domain. If you saw the PDC keynote with the US CIO, I think we made this very, very clear that things like data.gov, natural home, you see a lot of the content here, United Nations, World Health. We want that content in here, as well as things like NGOs. But again, we want to make sure that you actually have a right to distribute that content, as well as making sure you're giving private sector the right to build apps, the right to monetize that data if they actually build on top of that. So really, from an overview perspective, if you take one thing away from Dallas is we want you to own your business. We want you to set your terms, create your offers, bring your carve-outs, define the trials, and we basically do everything else. You're effectively paying your bill for, whether it's your compute that you're using, your storage, or Microsoft's. And really, we're the global merchant of record, basically, that's brokering your content, making it discoverable to all the IWs, to all the developers out there. And again, being able to recover this basically through this platform play that we're doing via markup, some markup basically to capture the bandwidth and the billing surcharges on top. And finally, what do you get as a content provider? Because again, this could be used to augment your existing channel. It's really, the revenue dashboard is an interesting thing that we're actually going to show in the next CTP. We are moving fast. We're a service. You're seeing multiple releases of this. But the revenue dashboard is actually going to give you tracking capabilities, not on a per user type of thing, but you'll actually know what organizations are doing. What are people asking for from your data? Are you exposing the right type of content? Is your pricing attractive? Are people doing mashups of that content? Is your data being used more on Bing Maps or Google Maps? Those kinds of interesting things might help you in terms of being able to add new pivots and such. And really, it's obviously the payment system. It should be obvious as a marketplace. Regular payments from Microsoft as your content is used. Again, this is a true brokerage business for it, for your web services, for your data, as well as, again, from your analytics. Once you start publishing visualizations through Dallas via a report gallery, that's going to be basically, again, if you have domain level knowledge and you've built an interesting app or service on top of this, think of Dallas as, again, using that same infrastructure to basically make that available out there. And finally, just this instant ability to create new offers to basically, whether you are a large provider who's been selling to your top 100 and can't scale to every iPhone, Android, developer that basically wants to come out and get a custom offer, with a couple clicks, you can subset your content. You can basically lock down your APIs and create these new offers to basically, or expand your offers. So that's the key thing is, you own your business. You own the data. You own the APIs, the terms of use, the pricing, and we are basically the massive enabler for this. So I do want to close up and leave some time for Q&A. And really, the biggest call to action here is CTP2 is available now. Use it. We would love your feedback. The NASA contest is going strong. And really, from a content provider perspective, we actually have enough to where we can have a pretty deep discussion if you have interesting content, if you have interesting services, as well as if you're an ISV who is thinking about the report gallery's perspective. If you think you have interesting, again, domain level knowledge to build a visualization, you want to sell it through Dallas, we want to talk to you. Whether it's Silverlight, whether it's Flash, whether it's basically code that lives in your cloud or ours, we want to have that conversation. So stop by. If you have content, please send us mail. Dallas BD is in business development at Microsoft.com. And actually, we've got a lot of content on Microsoft.com/Dallas for both the developers as well as a white paper on the business front and a lot of documentations and code samples of where we're going with this. So with that, I'll leave it open for Q&A. If you have questions, please don't be shy. Yes?
So if you're using the SQL Azure, you can name your SQL Azure databases and expose them via Dallas then?
Yes, actually, with a couple clicks. That's a great question. So the question was, if you're using SQL Azure, can you simply use Dallas as a value proposition for this? And absolutely, that was actually what we showed. That connection string, I should have been more clear with that, was actually just to an instance that Greg Glandon from the UPC database had set up for their content. We can go through this with the city of Miami that's in SQL Azure as well, or Windows Azure tables as well. Yep. Any? Yes? Right.
You should deal with all this content providers. They use different business models. They spend much more time than the developers, but just negotiating and finding the right way. So if we the service and pay some money for us for the app, it would be great. Where can they understand that in this model, we as a developer are paying such a big?
That is a fantastic question. I think that let's make sure we talk about that. So the question is, and actually this is something we wrestled with early on and finally have a solution that I think we can talk about that's not on Microsoft.com/Dallas. There's a developer key, and absolutely, that is the account that's basically billed. That's the one that we basically send the billing payments to. Now, you, as a true ISV, you don't want to basically pay for what the customer would use. No, exactly. So what we're introducing is a partner ID, right? So what the partner ID does is it still gives us and the content providers the visibility into who's building applications using that data. But the billing, imagine you have the username password on your app or in Office, right? They will actually have the billing relationship with us. So we're still the merchant of record, but we're billing the end consumer. You're getting a cut of the action directly from that. So we pay you, we pay the content provider. And we'll have to chat. Yes?
You said that you could use, if you have an OData service on your own data center, if you conform to a particular interface for Dallas, you can expose that. Can you talk a bit more about?
Absolutely, very easily. All basically what we want to do is, and that gets into if you're using OData, it makes it that much easier because you've already hit the service requirements. So now all you have to do is basically add in and pass in, don't ignore, the account ID, the partner ID, and the unique user ID. And basically make sure that, whatever, let's say if the service is built by you in your data center, just handle the scale requirements that we need. And then you get everything else basically literally for free. All the visual experience, the metadata, the query payloads.
Get a question.
Sorry.
Excuse me. I was interested in your statement about the authoritative sources and the top 5 content providers, and I'm concerned about the politics of it because I do a lot of government contracting.
Right.
So it might be easier just to give you 2 examples. Right, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the authoritative source for unemployment numbers, baselines every February. And it turned out that they were 1 million off.
Right.
Right? And so they are the authoritative source, and yet but there were actually some services that were closer to the real number, which probably aren't in your top 5. Another example is recovery.gov, about how the recovery money is being spent.
Right.
The most accurate source is recovery.org, not recovery.gov. So when it comes to saying, well, are you an authoritative source, or are you the top 5 for these data sets, I think it's going to be really difficult to start telling some folks that have been very accurate over the years that you can't play.
That's actually a great one, and I think the reason why we've had, it's no secret that we're working pretty closely with the federal government on this. Bureau of Labor Statistics was a great one. That's content that's basically on data.gov, on other sources as well, and we know, actually United Nations just as well. Right, you've got multiple footnotes on there in terms of errors, in terms of inconsistencies with data. But I think the key point is we want to make sure that there's someone actually that you can go to if you find discrepancies with the data. For federal data, it's going to be an easier conversation with us because we're actually working with the White House. Right? We're working with Vivek Kunder to figure out, what is the process of finding errors in the data? How do we get it into the cloud, and how do we expose it? And I think for something like public domain, where there are so many different things, it might not necessarily be top 5. That's why I didn't put the number on there. It might be end sources where each one, this one might be updated quarterly, less accurate, more data, that sort of thing. Great. Anybody else? Yes. No, that's a great question. So there is some PII data in here as well. So for instance, I know it's a typical Microsoft thing to stay away from that, but imagine selling yellow pages or directory listings, right, through this, or white pages, business demographics, commercial risk. There is that, and I think that's why the terms of use are actually going to cover that in terms of what you can do with that. as well as having other offers that basically filter that out and give it to you at an aggregation level. So there are two different things that we can support through it. Great question. The question was, are we looking at integrating this data into things like Bing to basically augment our search queries? And actually, to be honest, the answer right now is no, because really this is it's an information marketplace where if another team at Microsoft wants to leverage this content, they're just another ISV. It's not a Google play from that sense of, take the data and just, but yes. I'm sorry? Actually, yes. I'm hoping that made it. I must have skipped. I did skip it. I apologize. There was one critical bullet in there that basically said, actually having, through this rating process, where ISVs can actually come in and ask, we want this data, right? Actually recommending it or saying, you've missed something. So recommendations for us in our business development group to say, they may not be top 5, but we would build applications on that. We would definitely take that on. We just needed some filter, given when we actually came out at PDC and said, here's Dallas, we were literally flooded with requests. And it was, data from, Mo's fly fishing spots to, hey, I've got global data for oil wells and, really interesting content as well. Sports, gambling, et cetera. We just needed a bar to where we could actually start responsibly with what the content was and go through the validation. Great point, though. Yes?
Based on your Yellow Pages example, say there's someone that has 200 million records of content or data, how do you envision that pricing working and how they're going to purchase, I guess, that data?
No, that's great. So actually, we do have a lot of that. So for instance, sorry, the question was, if somebody's got a lot of data, like I'll use the info group example, where you have literally globally information about every single business, right? Owners, demographic, sales, et cetera. How do you create offers on that, or how should you think about creating offers on that? And really, it's a couple things. One of the advanced tabs I didn't show, stop by in the booth, we can bring it up, is you actually get to control paging. So what I really mean by paging is it's a poor nomenclature for it, but it really says what is a transaction in terms of how much data is returned as part of that query. So is it every 25,000 records that basically is something you want to bill for? But in the event of subscription pricing, that is truly unlimited offline pricing for that content, right? Because imagine you as a content provider, that user is going to take that data, bring it into their on-premise, Excel, do some interesting things with it. You're still getting paid. It is. Right now, we're starting simple just because, we want to hit commercial availability later this year. And so we're basically saying the offers are free trials, monthly, per user per month subscription, and transaction to start. And we'll roll out things like enterprise volume licensing and annual sales after. And again, that's per data set that you create or per offer. Yes? I'm sorry? Yes. Free. Yeah. No. So yes.
So I noticed some of your free content, I'm only able to search on certain columns.
Right.
And the columns I want aren't there. So how easy is it to get an index?
No, it's actually, we're taking care of that a different way. This CTP2, one of the big things that we've done is the OData integration for not just the payload that comes back, but for the query. So that example of the Greg Landon data that I published through our new publishing experience actually gives you full open OData queries on top of that. So anything in oh, my bad. Stop by at the booth. I'll show you that. But yeah, we basically said there are two different ways of getting access to Dallas. There's a proxy that we build with the content provider that says based on 80% of usage on this data, this is what customers want. We'll go build that one so it's a fast optimized query. But for the other 20%, they're like, I don't like your query, right? Give them a full SQL head. Full data head, not a SQL head. Anyone else? Great. Guys, thanks so much. I know we've gone over on Q&A, but definitely appreciate it. Thank you.